This was the little Chevy Vega the NHRA tried to ban, yet it went on to humiliate the biggest muscle cars in pro stock history.
Among the many muscle cars that ruled drag strips in the early 1970s, one little car caused more trouble than any of them. It was so controversial that NHRA inspectors threw it out before it even made a single run. This is the story of how Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins took the small Chevrolet Vega, a car that most people hated, and turned it into a machine that beat the biggest muscle cars in pro stock. This car didn't just win races, it changed drag racing forever. But the NHRA wasn't ready for what Jenkins built. His creation was too fast, too advanced, and too wild for their comfort. It wasn't just a car, it was a rebellion on wheels, a machine too powerful for the NHRA. By the dawn of the 1970s, American drag strips had become battlegrounds. Detroit's Big Three, Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler, were locked in an arms race, each building machines that blurred the line between streetcar and missile. The National Hot Rod Association, or NHRA, was struggling to keep control. Every year, engines grew larger, cars got faster, and safety officials rewrote rulebooks that racers treated like puzzles to be solved or broken. This was the golden era of pro stock, where legends like Sox and Martin, Don Nicholson, and Dick Landy ruled the strip with thunderous big block power. These cars were raw, loud, and brutal, designed to shake the ground and terrify anyone standing near the starting line. The rule was simple. Whoever had the biggest engine usually won. But that also meant the sport was slipping away from competition and drifting toward chaos. By 1971, NHRA officials realized something had to change. The gap between the factory-backed giants and the independent racers was growing too wide. Races were becoming predictable, and innovation was being buried under cubic inches. The association wanted to slow things down, to bring the sport back to balance. What they didn't realize was that their new rules meant to restore order would instead open the door to the most radical idea drag racing had ever seen. While most racers were obsessed with horsepower, one quiet engineer from Pennsylvania was watching carefully. Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins wasn't interested in noise or fame. He was studying the numbers, the weight charts, and the aerodynamic shapes that others ignored. And somewhere in his notebooks and calculations, he saw an opening, a tiny crack in the NHRA's new formula that could be turned into a weapon. The sport was about to change. The age of brute force was giving way to the age of brains, and at the center of that transformation stood a small, unloved Chevrolet Vega, waiting for someone daring enough to unleash it. Meet the man called Grumpy. Bill Jenkins wasn't born into racing glory. He built it one wrench turn at a time, hailing from Pennsylvania. He carried himself like a scientist trapped inside a mechanic's body. While most racers relied on instinct, Jenkins relied on equations, testing, and logic. He had a reputation for being serious, methodical, and, as his fellow racers joked, grumpy. The nickname stuck not because he was mean, but because he never smiled when the stopwatch was running. In an era when racing pits were filled with swagger, beer, and bravado, Jenkins stood apart. He didn't shout or celebrate. He studied. His notebook was always open, filled with ratios, torque readings, and fuel flow notes. To him, every nut and bolt had a reason to exist. He believed that consistency and precision could beat even the loudest horsepower. By the late 1960s, Jenkins had already earned respect with his Camaro builds and his uncanny ability to make small-block Chevrolet engines outperform larger Mopar Hemis. He was the man who proved that lightness and balance could rival brute strength. But behind that calm focus was a quiet rebellion, an urge to challenge the status quo. When the NHRA announced new pro stock rules for 1972, most racers shrugged. To them, it was just another page in a long, confusing rulebook. But to Jenkins, it was an opportunity, an open invitation to outthink the giants. He understood that drag racing was evolving. The question was no longer who could make the most power, but who could make the smartest car. So while others chased bigger engines, Jenkins was searching for something smaller, lighter, and faster through efficiency, not excess. That's when his sharp eyes turned to the most unlikely machine on Chevrolet's roster, a tiny car that everyone else laughed at, but one he believed could become the most dangerous weapon ever to touch the drag strip. When Chevrolet released the Vega in the early 1970s, it wasn't exactly a moment of pride. The car was supposed to be a compact answer to the fuel-conscious era, but it quickly became one of the most criticized vehicles in GM's history. Owners complained of rust, failing engines, and weak construction. It was the kind of car that muscle car fans used as the punchline of a joke. On the streets, Vega owners got laughed at by the drivers of Camaros, Mustangs, and Chargers. It was small, slow, and sounded more like a sewing machine than a drag car. In the muscle car world where power, noise, and size defined respect, the Vega was everything people didn't want. While a Dodge Charger roared like thunder, the Vega merely buzzed. While the Plymouth Barracuda could shake the ground, the Vega struggled to impress anyone. For performance lovers, it was a symbol of compromise, not courage. But sometimes genius hides in the most unlikely places. Beneath the thin sheet metal and modest design, Jenkins saw something no one else noticed. The Vega had a light body, a short wheelbase, and a shape that sliced cleanly through air. It wasn't built to race, but it had the bones of something that could. Where others saw failure, Jenkins saw opportunity. To him, the Vega wasn't a mistake, it was a blank canvas. Its small size meant it could fit into the NHRA's new Pro Stock weight formulas perfectly. Its low center of gravity and aerodynamic silhouette made it ideal for high-speed stability. And because everyone had written it off, nobody would see it coming. It was the perfect underdog, mocked, underestimated, and forgotten. But Jenkins didn't need public approval. He needed performance. He understood that real innovation often starts with what others throw away. The Vega was never meant to be a hero. But in the right hands, it could become the machine that scared the establishment and proved that brains could beat brawn on any track in America. The NHRA rule shift that opened Pandora's box. In motorsports, a single rule can change everything. By 1972, the National Hot Rod Association was growing uneasy. Pro Stock had become a playground for big-budget teams and monster engines. Cars with massive Hemi power plants were crushing the competition, and the gap between the heavy hitters and the independents was widening fast. Fans were starting to lose interest. Every race looked the same. The biggest engine always won. To restore balance, the NHRA made a crucial decision. They introduced a new system that matched a car's minimum weight to its engine size. Smaller engines could now run at lighter weights, giving underdogs a theoretical chance against the high-horsepower giants. On paper, it seemed fair, a way to level the field and encourage diversity. But what NHRA officials didn't realize was that this well-intentioned change would open the door to something they couldn't control. Most racers didn't pay much attention. The culture of drag racing still worshipped cubic inches. To them, downsizing was weakness. The big Mopars and Fords kept chasing horsepower, believing weight reduction couldn't match raw power. But Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins saw what others missed. He understood that physics doesn't care about tradition. Power-to-weight ratio, not displacement, was the real secret to victory. He studied the new NHRA tables line by line, searching for the sweet spot. And there it was, a loophole hidden in plain sight. The Vega's lightweight body and small block engine combination could exploit the rule perfectly. Under these new regulations, a small block Vega could run hundreds of pounds lighter than a big block Cuda or Mustang. That meant quicker launches, faster acceleration, and a deadly advantage off the line. The NHRA had accidentally written a rule that gave innovators like Jenkins the upper hand. It was an engineer's dream and an official's nightmare waiting to happen. For Jenkins, this wasn't just a change in numbers, it was an open invitation to rewrite drag racing's future. He now had the blueprint for something radical, something no one dared to imagine. All he needed was to bring that idea to life and prove that the smallest car on the track could become the most feared of them all. Building Grumpy's Toy 9. When Bill Jenkins decided to transform the humble Chevrolet Vega into a pro stock weapon, he knew it couldn't remain the fragile economy car everyone mocked. The project demanded a complete reinvention, one that blurred the line between production car and purpose-built racer. Out of his Pennsylvania shop emerged something no one had ever seen before. Grumpy's Toy 9, a machine that looked small but radiated menace. Under the skin, almost nothing about this Vega was stock. Jenkins began with a lightweight shell and stripped away everything unnecessary. The factory frame was replaced by a race-engineered structure, part stock, part tube chassis, carefully designed for strength, balance, and precision. The Vega's short wheelbase gave it quick reactions off the line, while its low stance reduced drag and improved stability. At its heart was a small block Chevrolet engine, 331 cubic inches of relentless efficiency. It was based on a bored and stroked 327, but Jenkins tuned it like a surgeon. Perfect combustion chambers, razor-sharp timing, and flawless carburation. What the car lacked in size, it made up for in perfection. Every ounce of metal, every bolt, Every angle existed for one reason: to extract maximum performance from minimum mass. The suspension setup was equally revolutionary. Jenkins experimented with MacPherson struts up front and a tough 3-link rear, paired with a Dana 60 differential capable of surviving brutal launches. It was a car designed to attack the strip with mathematical precision, not brute anger. And the moment it sat on its wheels, even before the engine roared to life, it looked fast. The headers jutted through the fenders like a declaration of war. Flames occasionally spit from their mouths during test runs, earning gasps from anyone nearby. Grumpy's Toy 9 didn't just move, it snarled. Fans and rivals alike stared, unsure if they were looking at a legal pro-stock car or a mechanical experiment gone rogue. To Jenkins, this was no rebellion for fame, it was proof of concept. A challenge to the entire idea of what drag racing could be. He believed engineering, not excess, was the true path to speed. But while the crowds were amazed, NHRA officials were not. To them, the Vega looked suspiciously advanced, maybe even dangerous. And as Jenkins prepared to roll his creation onto the starting line, he had no idea that this beautiful monster was about to ignite one of the biggest controversies in NHRA history. The NHRA inspection chaos. When Bill Jenkins rolled Grumpy's Toy 9 into the pits for the 1972 NHRA Winter Nationals, the entire atmosphere shifted. The Vega looked nothing like a pro-stock car was supposed to. It sat impossibly low, its stance aggressive and compact, its headers bursting through the fenders like cannons. Spectators craned their necks just to catch a glimpse, while rival teams whispered in disbelief. But the ones most unsettled by what they saw weren't the fans. They were the NHRA inspectors. The officials had seen creative builds before, but this was different. The Vega didn't look stock in any sense. The frame looked too professional, the stance too calculated, and those side exit headers, they were nothing short of outrageous. As the car sat under the inspection lights, a crowd began to form around it. Some racers smirked, convinced Jenkins had gone too far. Others watched in silence, sensing history was about to be made or rewritten. Within minutes, the tech crew began debating. The first issue, the headers. NHRA's pro-stock rules required exhaust systems to exit under the car, not through the fenders. Jenkins argued that the rules didn't forbid it. They simply didn't define it. Then came the chassis. Inspectors crawled underneath, flashing lights along the frame rails. What they found didn't match the factory layout. To them, the car was too advanced, too close to a full tube frame design. The NHRA valued the word stock like sacred law. To them, this Vega violated the spirit of pro-stock racing. If they let it pass, they feared the category would spiral into chaos, every team pushing boundaries until nothing resembled a production car anymore. So after heated arguments and hushed conversations, the verdict came down. Grumpy's Toy 9 would not pass inspection. For most racers, that would have been the end. Months of effort erased by a few signatures on a clipboard. But Bill Grumpy Jenkins wasn't built to surrender. As the crowd dispersed, he folded his arms and stared at the car in silence. Later that night, instead of packing up, he and his crew went to work. They teamed up with hooker headers, cut and re-welded exhausts, and made whatever changes were necessary to get back in the fight. By morning, the Vega returned, still wild, still brilliant, and barely tamed enough to pass inspection. Jenkins had proven that he could play by the rules without losing his edge, but deep down, NHRA officials knew the truth. This car wasn't just testing the limits of legality, it was redefining them. The 1972 Winter Nationals were supposed to be Bill Jenkins' big reveal, a chance to showcase what Grumpy's Toy 9 could truly do. But before the Vega ever reached the starting line, the NHRA had already made up its mind. To the officials, this car was too much, too refined, too perfect. They feared it wasn't a pro-stock car at all. It was something beyond the limits of their own rules. The final inspection was brutal. Officials surrounded the car like detectives at a crime scene, pointing at welds, measuring clearances, and cross-checking diagrams. The fender exit headers were the first offense. Illegal, they declared. Jenkins calmly opened the rulebook and pointed to the section that proved otherwise. It didn't matter. The next issue was the chassis. They said it was too custom, too far from a stock design. Jenkins reminded them that nothing in the rules forbade improving structural rigidity. Again, it didn't matter. This wasn't just about parts, it was about fear. The NHRA had built its reputation on fairness and control, but Jenkins' Vega represented something they couldn't regulate: ingenuity. If they let this car run, others would follow. The line between stock and experimental would vanish, and so they made their decision. Grumpy's Toy 9 was officially disqualified, thrown out before it even made a single pass down the strip. For the crowd, it was shocking. The car everyone came to see was gone before the show began. But for Jenkins, it was infuriating. Months of sleepless nights, precision engineering and testing, all crushed under the weight of bureaucracy. Yet, instead of rage, Jenkins showed restraint. He packed up his tools, but not his spirit. That night, as the noise of the track faded, the lights in Jenkins' pit stayed on. He and his crew worked relentlessly, redesigning the headers, adjusting mounts, and bringing the car closer to compliance without killing its soul. By dawn, Grumpy's Toy 9 was ready again, still small, still brilliant, and still terrifying to the establishment. When Jenkins rolled it back to the line the next day, the inspectors looked nervous. They had stopped a car once, but this time, it was clear. They couldn't stop the idea behind it. The Vega had already become a symbol of rebellion, a machine that proved even the NHRA couldn't contain true innovation. When the Vega returned to the track the next morning, few believed it would survive another round of NHRA scrutiny, let alone win anything. But as soon as Grumpy's Toy 9 roared to life, the laughter stopped. The car launched like a rocket, light, balanced, and unstoppable. Round after round, Jenkins beat bigger, louder, and more expensive machines that once ruled pro stock. By the finals, the small Vega faced veteran Don Grothier. The crowd expected Jenkins to fall short. Instead, he left Grothier behind at the green light, crossing the line first in spectacular fashion. The stands erupted. The so-called economy car had just destroyed the giants. The NHRA had tried to silence it, but Jenkins' creation turned rejection into revolution. The machine they once called illegal had just proven it was simply too powerful for the NHRA. Dominance on the drag strip. After the Winter Nationals, Grumpy's Toy 9 became a legend overnight. Race after race, Bill Jenkins and his little Vega tore through the competition, proving that intelligence could beat raw horsepower. In 1972 alone, Jenkins won 6 of 7 NHRA national events, a record that stunned even his rivals. The secret wasn't brute force, but precision. His 331 cubic inch small block produced around 585 horsepower, yet the Vega's lightweight and perfect balance gave it an edge no big block monster could match. Crowds began to chant, "Grumpy's Toy," every time the silver Vega rolled up to the line. For the NHRA, it was a nightmare wrapped in brilliance. The very rules they'd written to level the playing field had created a monster that no one could stop. The Vega wasn't just winning, it was redefining pro stock, and the NHRA knew they'd have to fight back. The NHRA couldn't ignore it any longer. Bill Jenkins' Vega was winning too much, too easily, and that made the officials nervous. What was meant to keep racing fair had spiraled into domination. So new rules began to appear, stricter chassis guidelines, exhaust regulations, and tighter engine classifications. The message was clear: slow the Vega down, but Jenkins wasn't the type to quit. Instead, he evolved. By 1974, he introduced Grumpy's Toy X, even more advanced, more aerodynamic, and now pushing nearly 680 horsepower. Each redesign pushed the limits further, forcing the NHRA to rewrite its book again and again. The war between innovation and regulation had begun. And every time the NHRA tried to contain him, Jenkins simply built faster, smarter, and wilder, proving that you can't cage progress, no matter how thick the rulebook gets. Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins didn't just rewrite racing rules, he rewrote what it meant to chase perfection. His Vega, Grumpy's Toy 9, proved that innovation will always outrun restriction. The NHRA may have tried to contain him, but in doing so, they immortalized his genius. What began as an underdog became a symbol of rebellion, courage, and pure American ingenuity. Even today, the echo of that small Vega's engine reminds us that legends are never tamed, they're remembered. It was the machine too wild for the NHRA, too powerful to silence, and too important to fade away. If stories like this ignite your love for classic machines and fearless minds, don't stop here. Subscribe to Regal Rides and keep exploring the untold stories of the cars that changed history. Because every legend we share still has fuel left in its tank,